let's move a little bit, put our future hats on, I guess. If you had to say, what's the state going to be of the soft-driven network, 3 years from now? I guess, I noticed, one of the big things that really stood out to me is when I got the latest Gartner on switched and wireless infrastructure, is for years, Cisco was always way up in the upper right? And then you had a bunch of people, and Juniper was in the left. They're way down. They're not even, I thought first from a sales perspective, they'd be higher, but they've dropped, not even high on the execution component. And the vision is nowhere either. To me, that means there's a paradigm shift going on, because for the last 20 years, it was a given, just kind of like Checkpoint was the firewall leader for 20, it had been in there for 20 years, and they got disrupted somewhat by a Palo Alto, we'll say. Something happened, obviously.
I mean, I have to say, the Gartner Magic Quadrant is a personal, career milestone. It's up there in my top 3 milestones, because, you think about, Mist started in my kitchen 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so we went from a blank sheet of paper to the upper right-hand corner of Gartner. So yeah, that does tell you something, that something's changing. I would say if you look at some of the very large customers we have right now, we have some very large Fortune 10 customers. Usually Fortune 10 customers don't bet on startups unless there's some architectural reason to bet on it.
Especially nowadays, since that's viewed as such a mature, switching and wireless been around for a few years. So that's to go with a startup on that. It's not like it's back in the days when, it was first coming out.
Right. So that goes back to, when we started Mist, people thought we were crazy. People were like, Bob, this is not going to work out like, this is not going to work out like you think it is. But, the thesis, and what I tell people is, if your product fit and market fit are correct, things will tend to work out. And what was true with Mist was the cloud and AI architectural change. Like, that is this, people are going to move.
And bandwidth, probably the bandwidth to enable all that in parallel, huh? I guess the cloud and compute.
Internet's getting bigger, right? The paradigm is shifting from running things on-prem to where people are, businesses don't work without the internet, right? People are starting to figure out that, they put a lot of time and effort to make sure that internet connectivity is reliable, because they're moving their software to the cloud, because fundamentally the cloud is just a much better way to develop software and maintain software, right?
Yep.
And it's really an architectural change from, 20 years ago, I was building stuff on a Linux box, embedded spaghetti code. And that is just a terrible way to do it, because, that's why it takes 9 months to get something released. 3 months of software development and then 9 months of regression testing. Mm-hmm. And then the customers still swear, did you bother to test this before you shipped it? Because you can never test all the iterations, right?
Yep. Then do you think that this just came to my mind because we were an Aerohive partner early on, and that, there was kind of the whole different paradigm shift especially with the distributed enterprise coming in, where you had the controller list. And did that help that maybe Cisco got derailed a little bit, trying to worry about controllers versus controllerless, and versus, really watching that the world could be changed. There's a way to change the world between the convergence of cloud, more bandwidth, that now you can start to focus on the application layer and get things done. And they're more worried about tactical stuff at the time,
I think Cisco, Cisco was an investor in Mist, right? So it's not like Cisco didn't know what was happening. That's what I'm saying. I think it's very hard for large companies when there's an architectural change. It's just very hard because there's organizational changes. That's what I'm saying. Right now I've got the data science team and the customer support team tied to the hip, right? That's organizationally, that's just hard to do in a big company. Organizationally, let's start having this group work with this group type of thing. That's what I'm telling you. That's a sign of something architecturally changed. When you see big, large companies trying to get their different business units to work together to respond to something, that's usually a clue that something's changing. So I think Cisco knows what's happening. I think it's just hard for big companies, to go through that organizational change, let alone the technology change that needs to have to go along with it.
And the revenue requirements, they got to keep Wall Street happy every quarter. And when it's a small market, it's hard to spend a lot of effort on that.
Well, and that's why startups exist, right? To be honest, I could have stayed at Cisco, but that's the challenge, right? When you're on a quarterly budget thing, every quarter budgets change and priorities change. When you're a startup, you're focused. You have
Right.
a pile of money, you have one mission, you don't argue about, what you're gonna do every quarter. You're on a mission to get something done. There's no
Sure.
distractions.